here and see what they're seeing at LikeFolio on Disney. Andy, to kind of tee you up here, from what everything we've talked about over the years here now on Fast Market with you guys, is that Netflix is kind of the winner right now, at least here in the U.S. In this space. But that isn't necessarily a bad thing for some of these companies. You know, there's plenty of room for a second and potentially even a third from what some studies are saying. Do companies like Disney recognize that yet? And does your data support that maybe they're gunning for second place?
Well, I hope they are, because that's where I think they're going to land. When we look at Disney, we're really for this earnings report, like Evelyn had talked about and you guys had talked about, we were very focused on subscriptions to the Disney Plus platform, to their streaming platform. And when we look at that chart, that LikeFolio chart, you can see unbelievable launch for the service, but since then, not so great. In fact, I think if a chart had a sound associated with it, you could pretty much hear the air coming out of the balloon here for Disney Plus new subscriptions. And I think this combined with the fact that the Verizon 1 year free trials start to roll off today, actually, as they go into this earnings report. And then when we combine all of that with just an overall malaise that we see from their subscribers in terms of how they're reacting to the content, this Mandalorian, the second one, just really not even coming close to the buzz and enthusiasm that they got for the first one. And they're really, because of COVID or whatever their excuses may be, they've really fallen short of subscriber expectations in terms of new original content. And the one thing that we've seen as we look at Netflix, Roku, Hulu, Disney, all of these, the number one driver of consumer satisfaction and of purchase intent, and on the other side of churn, is original content, new, original, unique content. And Disney, unfortunately, has fallen quite short in that regard. And so we think it's going to be tough for executives at Disney to put out that really enthusiastic guidance that Kevin had alluded to as being so important.
Yeah, Andy, there's so many things to go through, but I want to know your comment. And you're right, that new subscriptions mentioned count, the data that you put out, that is not getting anyone's heart rate up. Obviously, the euphoria on the first one. Here's my question. When I look at your data and going through it, the incidental bumps that you see in your data, is that from releases? Is that where they're getting small intermittent lifts? Are they getting them from like new products, like when they let out Mulan on streaming and things like that? Is that news based where you're getting bumps in the overall subscriptions?
Yeah, that's coming from the Hamilton release that they did was actually pretty big. Mandalorian, and then Mulan was a little bit of a spike, but not as big as those two. And so that is what drives new subscriptions. That is what keeps churn down, is original content. And as you look at that chart over time, you can just tell that there hasn't been a lot that got people excited over the course of this, kind of trial period over this first year. And I think Disney probably had really big plans when they launched it. I'm sure they wanted to come into this 1 year anniversary and this Verizon roll-off period with a little bit more ammo. But, the quarantines and pandemic have stopped a lot of original content production. And that's really hurting the company now, because they came out with everything that they had when they launched this and haven't had much to follow up with.
So, Andy, is then this next month and a half, 2 months as we round out 2020, is the key here, focusing on cancellations as that the bulk of the trial periods will start rolling off from the launch in that partnership with Verizon? I mean, I'm someone who has Verizon. I took advantage of that. To your point, that may influence this lack of new content or things that I might be interested in, might influence my decision here as that time to make that decision approaches rapidly. Is that what you guys will be focused on?
Yeah, for the streaming service, we'll absolutely be focused on cancellation mentions. They've been pretty consistent 5% across the year of all mentions of Disney Plus have been cancellation mentions. So that's kind of our baseline that we'll be watching as we go into the next month or two, and then again into the new year, because as we've seen with Netflix and other streaming subscription type of services, one of the big humps for them to get over is the New Year's resolution. Actually, on January 1st, believe it or not, is a big day for people sitting down with their credit card statements and cutting their expenses. And so I think that's why you see Netflix and some of these companies come out with so much content near the end of the year. We'll see if Disney's able to do that. From a streaming perspective, that's absolutely what we will be watching for Disney.
So then, final kind of thoughts here as we tie this all up. Disney's got a unique kind of base to it, as it's kind of the family oriented in terms of how they can market. If you have young children at home, a lot of the content is obviously geared towards that demographic. Probably going to be difficult to cancel for many parents for that reason. But the stock's had an incredible run off of its lows. Obviously, theme park situation is not really improved substantially. Do you start looking at this valuation here, looking at your data, knowing that trial period's coming to a close for many, and is that worrisome for you at these levels?
It is. I think that there's reason to have concern about these headwinds in the near term. I think that there's also, to contradict myself a little bit, from a long-term perspective, Disney is one of the greatest companies in the world. It has one of the greatest, most enthusiastic fan bases in the world. So while all this is happening, there's also a coiling spring of pent-up demand that is absolutely palpable in terms of ready to go to a park, in terms of ready to watch the new shows or new content that Disney puts out. So I think there's two competing forces there, and over the course of the next 2 to 3, maybe 6 months, we'll see which ones win out. And unfortunately, a lot of it is out of Disney's control. And I think that's probably the message that we're going to get from the executives on the call tomorrow.